let's talk about symmetric encryption. This is where we use the same key to both encrypt and decrypt. It's used extensively to protect data at rest, as I'd mentioned before. It provides confidentiality. It's excellent for bulk data encryption, large files, large amounts of files. It's fast with good performance. It's less resource intensive than asymmetric encryption, which makes it easier on smaller devices. You use the same key to encrypt and decrypt, but that puts the key at risk. You've got to share the key in advance, and if that key becomes compromised, then all files are at risk for loss of confidentiality. So here's a picture. We have original text, whatever it is. It may not be text, but something that we call plain unencrypted something, plain text. We'll have a secret key, which again, a key is anything that we can ultimately reduce to a number. Even if it is a geometric pattern on your face or some kind of voice match or something, if we can digitize it, if it's analog, like your voice or something, if we can digitize it and reduce it to a number, that's a key. Usually it's just a password. So we have this key. We use this same key in the encipherment process, and we come up with encrypted data. And then again, the same key for the decryption process, and out comes the plain text again. A block cipher is a type of encryption where we have a big document or a big file and we encrypt it in chunks. So block cipher takes a block of plain text bits and it generates a block of ciphertext bits, usually the same size. The size of the block is fixed, so it's always like 64-bit or whatever. The choice of the block size does not directly affect the strength of the encryption. The strength of the cipher depends upon the key length. So you can see here that we're doing plain text in chunks until all the chunks are done. And we end up with all these chunks that are kind of put back together again into one big encrypted file. Here are some block cipher symmetric algorithms, and yes, you need to know this. The good old DES, Data Encryption Standard. This was broken in 1997, 1998. Basically, there was a challenge. Can you crack DES? So this is like the granddaddy of block ciphers. You take these fixed length blocks of plain text and you turn them into fixed length blocks of ciphertext. It's inherently weak by today's standards. It was broken a long time ago. Then we have something called triple DES, 3 DES, where we just do DES basically 3 times to increase the encryption. You take the output of one, you run it through it again, and then one more time. But we don't use either DES now. I mean, by today's standards, they're just not good enough. Now we have the Advanced Encryption Standard, AES. It's the current US government standard. It is a symmetric key algorithm. It's designed to secure unclassified sensitive US government documents. So again, we do blocks, but we keep the same operation going repeatedly, and the block sizes are 128 bits. And then AES can have different key sizes. So you see a little pattern here? If it's AES 128, it means the key is 128 bits long. Or if it's AES 192, well, the key is 192 bits long, etc. Here are some block cipher symmetric algorithms besides DES, triple DES, and AES. There's also Blowfish. I know it sounds funny. 64-bit block cipher, and the key length, it kind of depends. Faster than DES. Twofish, yeah, Blowfish, Twofish, Greenfish, whatever. Okay, anyway, sorry, Dr. Seuss. Twofish, also 128-bit block cipher, and then a variable key length. Then you have the RCs. Now, not RC4, because that's a stream cipher, but RC2, and this is the Rivest cipher. It's Ron Rivest, one of those 3 original guys at MIT. So RC2, 5, or 6, and they go from 64 to 128-bit. Each iteration increases the key size, and RC6 now supports 2040-bit keys. That's pretty darn big. So now let's talk about the stream cipher, and we had mentioned this a little bit earlier, but let's take another look. We process individual bytes or bits or characters at a time. We don't divide the file into chunks. Instead, it's one bit or byte at a time. As we're transmitting, we will XOR the bits. We'll take a continuous stream of the unencrypted file, whatever it is, and then we'll also, at the same time, generate what's called a pseudo-random sequence. So you've got your file or whatever going bit at a time. This is why it's good for transmissions. It's coming down one bit at a time. We will also at the same time create a pseudo-random. So you've got your file or whatever going bit at a time. This is why it's good for transmissions. It's coming down one bit at a time. We will also at the same time create a pseudo-random. So they're going in parallel, and then we XOR them, and we'll see whatever the output is. The output is then the encrypted output. At the receiving end, you use that same pseudo-random sequence, that same symmetric key, and you XOR to decrypt. It is often faster than block ciphers, and it's useful when transmission errors are likely to occur, but hey, it's okay. You have a bit here, a bit there. You know what? If we're transmitting voice or video in real time, it's okay if we have little glitches. We just keep going, as opposed to trying to send a whole file where we don't want to have any errors. You will probably see a situation where you have to take a look at here's the plain stream text. This is the original. And then the pseudo-random stream is this thing that's constantly being generated from the key. So let's XOR this. We don't have to do every single one, but you need to get the picture here. Remember, XOR is kind of like counterintuitive, right? If the two bits are the same, it's false, you get a 0. If they're different, it's true, you get a 1. So these first two are the same, so false, 0. The next two are the same, false, 0. The next, 0 and 1, they're different, so true. See what's going on? The next two, it's false. The next two, it's true. Again, true. Again, true, but 2 1s, false, okay? You'll need to be able to identify this. Let's take a look at the stream cipher symmetric algorithms. There's RC4, I've mentioned it a few times. That's really popular, and by itself it's good. But WEP in Wi-Fi used it, but they had a weak implementation of it that had a statistical bias, which means it was easy to crack if you captured enough packets. The key length of RC4 can be anywhere from 40 to 2048 bits, and in WEP it was 64 to 128. Then there's PKZip. This is a compression program that uses a stream cipher to encrypt files. Then there's PKZip. Now, although we use it for data at rest, it is a stream cipher. It's an archive compression program, so when you encrypt a zip file, it will use a stream cipher to do the encryption. Let's take a look at a data at rest scenario. You regularly perform backups of your critical servers. You can't afford to send the backup tapes to an off-site vendor for long-term storage and archiving. Instead, you store the backup tapes in a safe in your office. Security auditors tell you, hey, it's safer to send them to an off-site place. Well, yeah, duh. Your manager wants to take the tapes home in her briefcase every night. What can she do to secure those tapes while in transit? Now she's driving home or walking home or taking the train or something. She can encrypt the backup tape driving home or walking home or taking the train or something. She can encrypt the backup tape. Keep in mind that this is data at rest. Even though she's put it in her briefcase, it's data at rest. It's on storage media, tape. For good measure, have her carry them in a lockbox, not just her briefcase. So keep in mind that this data is still considered at rest, even though someone is physically carrying them to another location. The data is not being transmitted across a network. So here's the key. Data at rest, you cannot sniff it. You can't run Wireshark, okay? But data in transit, you can. All right. So that is our look at symmetric algorithms. Now let's move on.